O sweet Pageantry of the earth. Usually, what is understood as pagan belief in gods is the belief in mythologies. Do we believe in Zeus that copulates with everything? Do we believe in moon goddesses that run hither and thither, to and fro, chasing the wild hunts? Or do we follow the example of Julian, the emperor, autocrat, who wrote that mythologies are for toothing children? But to understand the depth of the mythologies, to understand the depths of the powers and forces behind them, requires a wise man. Therefore, starting with Plato and moving onwards to Neoplatonism, starting with the Egyptian panentheism and moving onwards to technical ceremonies, it would be wise enough to assume that the world, following Plato's authority, is intelligible and whole. If it is intelligible, it is interconnected, and if it is interconnected, it also has certain laws and rules that are followed, and that constitute cosmos, or an adornment, ordered whole. Of course, in these religions, there was no such thing as an artificer, as a personal deity resembling a human being that moved the universe into being. These are understood as highly advanced forces and powers that are only reified and approximated in geometrical, harmonious, mythological, physical senses. Yet, what differentiates it from the physical perspective is its metaphysics. We consider physics the science of the shadows of this world. We consider philosophy or philosophical astronomy the study of metaphysical essences of this world. Both sciences are equally valid. Both are equally important in a pagan mindset, at least a Neoplatonic one. Inasmuch as all the gods and goddesses amongst cultures were called by different names, whether these were nature spirits, whether these were elementals, whether these were higher forces, whether these were transcendent forces, whether these were stars as gods in astrolatry, gods and goddesses. We need to discern a certain thing, that these are de-anthropocentrized, these are not human forces. And in Egypt that was well understood by making bionic statues of the anthropozones, something from divinity, something from the human world, and something from the animal world. And that is the correct mode of understanding, the modus operandi of it all. Now, when we address a certain deity, we address a mask of her force. And by addressing the mask of the force, we humanize it a bit. By humanizing it a bit, we may relate to it. And thus we are invoking a certain force, which may be omnipresent, which may have a greater or lesser range of being and act. If we may call those forces ideas like Plato did, they work through ideas. And the act of gods is the movement of idea to the subject of the idea, and therefore giving away impressions through forces. If we take the generative modus of the world, it goes from the beginning, the preformative stage of cosmos, the force that opens the gates of time and space, the chaos that gives away matter for the world to formulate itself. And thus we find that by generation, from stars to world systems to planets, through life that evolves, mutates, transmutates, through life that may be deified, redeified, rectified by a common substance shared with the intelligible universe, we find that every being has a certain alchemical setting, in which it is transposed into other being, in the metamorphosis described by Apuleius. The Chinese believed in fox spirits, the African shamans in the spirits of nocturnal animals that unveiled themselves in the form of shadows. Shadows as called kaibit, shut in Egypt, of the recently deceased and the more chthonic forces. The belief in angels and archangels is nothing new. It was developed in Chaldea and in Egypt. In Greek-Roman times, the belief in angeli bonum and daimonions, the agathos daimonions, was also not a novelty, although taken over by Christianity and Judeo-Christianity as something appropriated, as something of theirs. Therefore, in such an intelligible world, it was wholly possible for the human being, in correct setting, during correct rites, metamorphosis, to change, shift shape into a different being post-mortem, after the soul shed its Dionysian tomb, after the soul refined was set free, after a life full of commitments, heroism, nobility, and greatness was finding its fruition in the perfected state. But only in life one could achieve this kind of perfection, this kind of attainment. Just like the Buddhists, the great bodhisattvas, the heroes of the East, or the Indian bodhisattvas, they have perfected themselves throughout life. They have committed to this life in great compassion, bowing towards life. We may relate to a certain walk, mentioned first in Heraclitus, then in Porphyry, the antronym pharum, that harmony of tension and opposites is like a bow, that if we understand the doctrine of coincidence, of dualism, the opposites, and we find a transcendent third, a certain point that unites them all, we are on the right way, and we are not completely imbecile practitioners of the way. Thus, in this shortcut, I simply wanted to elucidate what is meant by belief in gods. Not that this universe is without being of diverse spiritual traditions, lineages, ethics of gods and goddesses, but to accentuate a certain valid point that this universe is living, it is alive, it is not cold, alienated, and we are not completely alone. It takes a question of perspective, of an angle of seeing, to see this world as full of divinity, and to participate in it as such. If this ancient mode of seeing would be preserved and not destroyed, perhaps this world would look a bit differently than it does now. This said, I wish you all the best.